Hey, my name is Sia Khatladi. This is African Disclosure, and this is our program for today. So, across Africa, right, and really in much of the world, societies are not only built by the leaders who occupy positions of power, but also ordinary people who choose to serve for causes greater than themselves, right? So you get people who march against injustice and reshape the course of history. And others, they travel far from home to protect vulnerable communities and help preserve peace in places torn apart by conflict. So whether fighting for freedom, equality, dignity, or security, their sacrifices often become the foundation upon which future generations build. So on the show today, we're going to be getting into two stories that remind us of the power of service, courage, and collective action. So first, we're going to be looking at the launch of South Africa's 70-year commemoration of the historic 1956 Women's March. And right there, we're going to be getting into whether the legacy of the women who marched to the Union buildings continues to offer lessons for a country that is still confronting gender inequality, economic exclusion, and gender-based violence. Later on, we're going to be turning our attention to International Peacekeepers Day. And we're going to be exploring how South Africa continues to contribute to Africa's peace and stability agenda while honoring the men and women who have served under the United Nations flag, including those who paid the ultimate price. They paid the ultimate price in missions such as MONUSCO in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So these are two very different stories. One rooted in the struggle for justice at home during apartheid, right here in South Africa, and the other rooted in the pursuit of peace beyond our borders. But both are connected by a common question, right? The way I think about this is, what responsibilities do we inherit from those who came before us? And how do we carry their work forward in our own times? That's what we're going to be getting into on the show today. So you do want to stick with us. My name is Sia Khatladi. Let's get it going. All right, welcome back to our show. It is time to get into our first conversation. And really, the central question here is around the legacy of the 1956 Women's March. Will the legacy of this 1956 Women's March help to drive South Africa's next chapter of empowerment? So we have attended an event this week, and it was when Minister in the Presidency for Women, Youth, and Persons with Disabilities, Minister Sindisiwe Chikunga, she has launched the national program commemorating 70 years since one of the most remarkable acts of resistance in South African history. In 1956, the Women's March was a central moment in the struggle against apartheid and in the struggle against some of the unjust laws that were in effect at the time. The commemoration event that we attended was held at Freedom Park in Pretoria, and it marks the beginning of a nationwide program honoring the women who challenged apartheid's past laws and helped reshape the country's liberation struggle. The initiative is being carried out under the theme, Empowered Women, Empower the Nation. Empowered Women, Empowered the Nation. That's the theme here. But this 70th anniversary, this platinum jubilee, this anniversary is not just about history, right? It's also about whether the courage, organization, very important, we'll talk about that more, the courage, organization, and political imagination that was showed by those women 70 years ago, right? Whether that courage, organization, and political imagination still has lessons for South Africa today, right? Because, okay, yes, apartheid past laws are gone. Good riddance. But many South African women continue to face economic exclusion. They continue to face gender-based violence, workplace discrimination, unequal access to opportunities, and the burden of unpaid care work. In fact, Minister Sindisiwe Chikunga is very, very adamant on her agenda of looking after care workers. She has spoken quite a lot about the care economy and the importance of the care economy. And women are largely, disproportionately represented in the care economy. So if the care economy is broken, that's a broken system that women have to be dealing with. So on the show, as we reflect on where we have come from and where we are today and where we still need to go, we need to understand the significance of this moment. And that's what we're going to be doing. So let's start by going back, all the way back to 1956. It was a time that I wouldn't even want to imagine myself living in, because South Africa was still firmly. If South Africa was not even a decade in, yes, if apartheid began in 1948 formally, then in 56 they were not even a decade into apartheid. And this system had grown stronger and stronger, and Black South Africans of color all over the country were firmly under the thumb of apartheid rule, firmly suppressed. The government had already imposed past laws on black men, restricting where they could live, where they could work, where they could travel. And authorities now sought to extend these oppressive controls to black women. And the response to that was extraordinary. Women across racial, political, and social backgrounds united through the Federation of South African Women, known as FEDSAW. And they united really to resist the expansion of the past system. What happened next remains one of the greatest acts of grassroots mobilizations in African history, in my opinion. It's definitely one of my favorite stories in African history. And this story takes place on the 9th of August in 1956. More than 20,000 women, they traveled from all sorts of corners of South Africa. They came from cities, they came from rural villages, they came from townships. And they came together as women to march to the Union building to go and say, no, we do not accept these past laws. The deputy minister in the presidencies for women, youth, and persons with disabilities, Minister Mapaseka Steve Letsike, when she was making her speech at this launch event, she said that a lot of these women carried babies on their backs. A lot of the black women who were domestic workers, they came hand in hand with the white children that they looked after during the day while their bosses were off at work. 20,000 women, 20,000 people mobilized, coming from all over South Africa to the Union buildings for a simple objective, but a powerful one: to reject these past laws, to deliver petitions opposing past laws and demonstrate that women would not quietly, they wouldn't sit down and just accept oppression. The march was led by some extraordinary women, most of which have left us now. Women like Lillian Ngoyi, women like Helen Joseph, women like Rahima Musa, and women like Sophia Williams, the Brain. It was actually quite interesting. So while I was on my way to the event, I was driving around in Pretoria, and I'm driving, and for some reason I just caught the attention, or the street name caught my attention, and I was on Sophie the Brain Street. And I thought to myself, wow, how ironic is that I'm literally going to an event to celebrate women like Sophia Williams, the Brain, and I'm driving in a road that's named after her. It was just funny for me to think of. And what's even more ironic is that Sophia Williams, the Brain, was there. She was there at this event, and I will tell you, she looked beautiful. She did not look like an old woman at all. She looked like a beautiful woman, a powerful woman. She was dressed in a great brown little outfit, and she exuded power, man. I don't know how else to put it. She exuded the power that they displayed 70 years ago on the 9th of August. So these women, they coordinated one of the largest political demonstrations we've seen in South Africa. And perhaps one of the most astonishing aspects of the story, right? One of the most impressive things, if we think about it, okay, is that these women did this without social media. That's something else that was said at the launch event that I thought I have to share with you. So imagine, for you today, just think about it yourself, okay? If you needed to get 20,000 people to march with you, how would you do it? Obviously, you'd use social media, right? You'd make a poster, you'd put it on Twitter, you'd put it on WhatsApp, you'd try to use social media to mobilize, and more power to you. That's the best way to do it right now. But imagine having to do this without social media. You can't put it on a WhatsApp group. There's no Facebook events. You can't post on Twitter. You can't do a TikTok campaign. Heck, there wasn't even a mailing list. No smartphones. But these women, with the grit, the pure grit and ingenuity and fight against this oppression, with this fight in their hearts, they organized. They built networks across provinces, communities, churches, unions, political organizations. They came together, they organized transport. They gathered many, many thousands of signatures. They communicated across vast different distances, and the authoritarian government that was trying to suppress them in some ways, trying to suppress political activities. So think about that for a moment, because I said I want to talk about organizing as activists of today, as the people who are trying to fight for a better South Africa today. One of the most important points of the work that we've got to do is to organize, is to bring people together. And I think it's incredibly, crucially, vitally important that we learn that lesson in being able to organize on a mass scale and being able to organize well on a mass scale. And we've got the tools now. We have social media, luckily. So gathering 20,000 for a worthy cause should be easy for us. It should be easy for us. The women of 70 years ago, they had to do it with no digital tools. We today live in an age where we have instant communication and unlimited digital tools. So how is it that we can struggle to organize sustained collective action around issues that affect our communities? So the women of 1956 should remind us that technology does not create movements. Of course, it helps in a big way. But you know what creates movements? People, leaders, discipline, commitment, a unified purpose. Those women understood something that many modern societies, I don't want to say we've forgotten, because I think it's very easy for us to say we've forgotten and it's a nice narrative. I think there are very, very active, very good activists who are organizing and disciplined and are doing great work to this day. I can name them. I can name the organizations that are doing great work. So it's not to say that we've forgotten the lessons of the women of 1956. But what they understood was that meaningful change doesn't come from individual outrage alone. We're all angry at some of the stuff going on. But our individual outrage is insufficient. Change is going to come from organized communities acting together the way those women did in 1956. And perhaps for me, when I look at it, that's one of the most important lessons that the women of 1956 leave us. If South Africans want to tackle unemployment, we want to tackle crime, we want to tackle corruption, we want to tackle our education, gender inequality, social fragmentation, all of these things that rightfully, it's not even us that bring it up. Our government will tell you that, yes, we've got work to do as South Africans. If we want to be able to do that work effectively, what are we going to need? We're going to need that same collective spirit that the women of 1956 had. We're going to need that same organization that they demonstrated. Because the reality is that while South Africa has achieved significant progress since 1994, and that is something that was very much highlighted at this event, we've achieved significant progress. I mean, health outcomes are much better for women. Women have franchise. There's been a lot of changes. Women are more represented in leadership positions. Women are getting educated at a much, much larger rate, right? So there's been a lot of progress made. But the uncomfortable truth, the truth which would be irresponsible for me not to share with you, is that women continue to face major challenges. Women continue to face major challenges. Women remain disproportionately represented among the poor. They continue to experience barriers to economic participation and leadership opportunities. They carry an overwhelming burden of unpaid care work. This is a problem that is very close to our minister's heart. And then you get rural women who often face additional barriers related to land ownership, to access to services, and economic opportunities. Young South Africans, young women, continue to face high levels of unemployment. And perhaps most devastatingly, South Africa continues to grapple with the crisis, the national crisis of gender-based violence and femicide. South Africa continues to have a dark underbelly, in the words of Slavoj Žižek. South Africa continues to have a dark underbelly that we must really, really look at some of this ugliness, because it's our responsibility to confront it. We can't hide from the ugliness and say, no, I don't want to look at that. We have to look at it head on. We have to say it. People like me who work in the media, we have to say it. South Africa's got a problem of gender-based violence and femicide. It's not a small problem, it's huge. And it's not an individual problem. It's a societal problem. It's almost a structural problem. A very interlinked, interwoven, complex problem to tackle in any simple way. There is no simple solution. I think there are a number of systemic solutions that need to come together and work towards building a culture that is against gender-based violence. But the truth is simple, that the problem is there and it's our job to confront it. Because women are still facing problems that are connected to historical inequalities, economic exclusion, and some deeply rooted attitudes that aren't the most conducive to the safety of women. Like a sort of a patriarchal spirit, right? So, as we're remembering the women of 1956, right? The women of 1956 had a problem that was legislative. It was a legal problem. The law was literally oppressive. The law was bad. It was terrible. Okay? It was a legal problem. But today, I think we make a mistake, in my opinion, when we focus on legislation. Okay? Because South Africa already has some of the most progressive constitutional and legal protections for women anywhere in the world. Even when it comes to gender-based violence or domestic violence. We've got some great laws on paper. So if we're fighting a problem of today, particularly the problem of the gender-based violence, I don't think it's a legislative issue. I don't think there is any law or policy that the government could enact that would be a magical switch. And I'm happy to welcome debate on that point. I'm happy for anyone to reply to me and let me know what legislative changes they think could be made that would address the problem. I'm happy to listen to those. And maybe there is a level at which it is legislative. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not extremely aware of the law. I don't know the fine details. But I am aware that, we've got some great protections for women. So it's not a legislative issue. If it's not primarily an issue of the law, then what is it? Is it implementation of the law? Is it a problem of our culture? Are our cultures a bit patriarchal? Is that a question that we need to ask? Is it an issue of power? Right? Because it goes far beyond a legislative issue. I'm willing to die on that hill. That it's not simply a legislative issue. There is something deeper that we need to look at within ourselves as South African men and women. I say men and women because we are responsible altogether for creating the society that we have. And when such a significant part of our population are victimized, then that's something we've got to confront together. When we discuss gender-based violence, it's important to recognize that government actions alone can't solve the problem. Police intervention matters, prosecution matters, legislation matters, of course. But violence against women begins long, long, long before a criminal case reaches a courtroom. It begins with our social norms. The way we talk about women when we're just a group of guys together. Are we talking about women in a healthy way? It begins with harmful ideas about masculinity. Harmful ideas about femininity as well. It begins with systems that teach boys entitlement and teach girls silence. Oh, big one. Mama Balegambet. We're going to be hearing an interview with her now. She's the former deputy president of South Africa. We managed to get an interview with her that you'll listen to now. But Mama Balegambet, as well as several other of the female leaders that were at this commemoration event, this launching of the 70-year celebration of the 1956 Women March. Several of the women pointed out a key issue that, we need to stop teaching our daughters this. And it's the issue of ukubegezela, to persevere. So for those of you listening outside of South Africa, let me teach you a little bit of isiZulu and what some women are taught. So ukubegezela, that's what you call it in isiZulu, or to khotlelela ka Sepedi ra khotlelela in the Sepedi language, Northern Sotho. Those words mean to persevere. And what happens is when a woman enters a marriage, she's often told, hey, you need to persevere. Whatever that man puts you through, you need to persevere. And that sort of attitude, I'm not the one saying we need to confront this in our culture. It's our female leaders. It's Mama Belegambet. That sort of attitude is very wrong. As a woman, I don't believe that you should be persevering in a marriage. You should be thriving, not persevering. And when we teach ideas like a woman needs to persevere, are we not implicitly making it okay for the man to put her through something which she has to persevere? Do you understand? So you get how this is not a legal problem. There is no law that tells women to persevere. No, it's us. It's our mothers and fathers, when we get married, that tell our wives to persevere. And those are some of the attitudes that we need to confront. Those are some of the things that normalize abuse, that excuse violence, and that fail to challenge patriarchal attitudes. So, structural inequality and harmful social norms remain major barriers to genuine empowerment for women. And we know the theme of our celebration this year of the 1956 Women's March. What is it? Empowered women empower the nation. So to empower our women and to empower the nation, we must break these barriers. And that means ending gender-based violence requires more than government programs. Government has its part to play, of course, but it requires families, schools, religious institutions, communities, men, and women, all participating in a sort of cultural transformation. The women of 1956 didn't wait for permission to create change. They organized. They identified their problems the same way we've identified the problems: gender-based violence, access to jobs, poverty. We've identified the problems, but much like the women of 1956, perhaps exactly what we need is to organize like they did. And that brings us back to the theme that was launched. Empowered women empower the nation. Empowered women empower the nation. It's a cool slogan. And look, I hate sloganarianism as much as the next guy. Right? I feel like just coming up with slogans is very easy, whatever. But if we look closely at it, the slogan does reflect a sort of truth. When women gain access to education, entire families benefit. When you empower that woman with education, quite simply, generations benefit. We don't need to go far for this example. Look at me. Look at me. I am the son of a firmly middle-class black woman who was able to build a life for herself by getting educated. So me, I am the product of this sort of empowerment of women that we're looking for all women. When women participate actively in the economy, communities become more resilient. When women occupy leadership positions, institutions, maybe they can become more representative and more responsive, particularly to the issues of women. When young girls see successful women in politics, in business, in science, in media, they begin to imagine these possibilities for themselves. And we do see this already. Like I said, we've made massive progress in pushing the issues of women. I think in a lot of ways, the women of 1956 would be proud of where we've come today. But they would still say that there's work to do. They would definitely still say that there's work to do. And now it's our turn. The women of 2026, the men of 2026. It's our turn. And I say it's our turn collectively because women's empowerment is not a women's issue. It's a national issue. It's a development issue. There's no country that can achieve its full potential when its population of women remains constrained by gender-based violence, by discrimination, unequal opportunities. All of these things that plague women are literally disadvantaging all of us. Our societies will thrive when our women thrive. So this empowerment, this empowered women empower the nation, It's not about charity. It's not even about symbolic empowerment. It's not just being woke and politically correct. It's a strategy for development. It's a strategic investment in our national development. And the need to confront these problems is why the legacy of the women of 1956 remains relevant today. They weren't just fighting for themselves. They were fighting for future generations too, including ours. As Minister Chikunga noted during the launch of the commemoration program, this anniversary is not only about honoring the past, it's about mobilizing society today to confront the present day challenges, including this gender-based violence that we've been talking about, including this economic exclusion we've been talking about, including the discrimination we've been talking about. The women who marched in 1956 understood that freedom is never a finished project. I imagine they understood that. For sure. I imagine they're very, very bright, politically conscious women who would have known that the project of freedom is never a complete one. Every generation, it gets the work that it has to do. It inherits the struggle that they have to go and fight now. So they fought against past laws. They fought against apartheid. It's our turn now. We must confront inequality. We must confront violence. We must confront economic exclusion. We have to confront social injustice. So we have different challenges than the women of 1956, but we have the same need for courage, organization, and solidarity. That need for those things remains the exact same as in 1956. And with that in mind, with the idea in mind that we need the same courage, organization, political imagination, and solidarity with each other, with that in mind, I want to take you to Freedom Park, where I've managed to capture quite a few interviews with some of our female leaders, including United Nations representatives, including our former deputy president, leaders, activists, and women gathered to launch the 70-year commemoration of the 1956 Women's March. Among them was the former deputy president, like I've said, the Gauteng MEC for Health, Wellness, Faith Mazibuko, and several other women leaders committed to advancing gender equality in South Africa. As you listen to this montage of interviews and singing from these women, I want you to ask yourself this question. What would the women of 1956 ask of us today? Those women who organized and who fought so valiantly, 20,000 of them coming together to fight for their rights, to fight for our rights as future generations. What would they ask of us today? And I also want you to ask yourself, are you listening to me from wherever you are, in a bus, in a car, at home, whether you're eating a meal, wherever you're listening from, are you willing to organize and mobilize and act with the same determination that they showed 70 years ago? Without any further ado, let's go to our montage on the ground.
In fact, this theme comes at a right time when we remember those women, what they were marching for in 1956. They were marching so that then the coming generations, which is us now, they were the champions by then. And we are the beneficiaries of what they marched for that time. And nowadays, if not today, we see a lot of women, especially young women, being empowered. And that is how we are demonstrating how the baton gets passed from one generation to the other. And it is such an exciting thing to see that happening. And it makes, it warms our hearts to say, by then, they marched on their own, but today we are beneficiaries. As women who are now in the political arena, it is up to us to make sure that we further improve the lives of other women who may not have those opportunities, who may not have even access to some of these things. But it is us who must ensure that there should not be any woman who goes to bed hungry. There should not be a girl child that misses school because she does not have sanitary pads and it's that time of the month and she has to miss school. So that responsibility now sits on our shoulders to further improve our women. Over and above, empower them economically. Women nowadays must be at a place whereby they're able to get things on their own, not to depend on men for them to be able to do things for them. So this theme is such an exciting one because it's a clear demonstration that 70 years down the line, where are we as women of South Africa and women of the world, and where are we in relation to making sure that even generations to come, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, they are able to benefit from what those foremothers in 1956 marched for.
And what are some of the biggest lessons that women activists of today can learn from the women activists of 70 years ago? And what are some of the similarities and differences in their struggles?
What women of today must learn is that if you hold the knife by its sharpest point, you will be able to liberate more and more generations of women. You will be able to ensure that women are not discriminated and that women do get opportunities for them to actually improve their life. What we further learned from those women of 1956 is that they were able to be there to stand against the test of time. So nowadays, as women of today, we must be more stronger than what those women in 1956 were. And we hope that as we continue on this journey to further liberate our women, as we're heading towards 100 years, we'll see more and more of our women being empowered.
Yeah, and we have already seen a lot of progress, but like has been rightly observed today, there's still a lot more work to be done. The former deputy president mentioned some very heartbreaking stories in her speech about stories that women go through every day. So my last question is, what is the role of society and men in society as well in breaking this culture that treats women in this way, like we've heard in some of those stories?
What men must do is they must make it their own campaign and stand up and say, no woman will be abused, not in our lifetime. So this is what we need men to do. And women, they must break the silence. Let us not keep quiet when we know that we are being abused or we live in abusive relationships, but speak and be able to break the silence. What perpetuates gender-based violence is because women decide to keep quiet and say, if I speak, this man won't support me anymore. I will die hungry or I will suffer. There is no grave of a woman who died because she was very hungry or did not have food. But I'm sure as women, with these hands that we have, we're able to do things for ourselves and we can be able to survive on our own. Instead of depending on men because you just stay there because you don't have a way of making a living, that is why you live in an abusive relationship. Wish to call upon all women, stand up and stand up for your right. Let's all say enough is enough. It can't be right that women continue to be abused under our eyes. What we need to do is to put an end to it. And no one will put an end to it. It's women themselves. And men working together with women in ensuring that those women are no longer abused anymore. Danke, Nyabo.
So as we commemorate the legacy of the women of 1956, it is very important to understand that a revolution evolves with time. Now, what that generation did for us was to lubricate our journey for us to get to opportunities faster, more opportunities in more numbers, but also higher strides. But most importantly, it then begs the question, how do we get into the rooms that transform society? We get educated. You ensure that when you go and become an engineer, You don't just become an ordinary engineer, but you will become one that transforms the society and implements transformation. We don't reproduce spatial apartheid again. When you're a town planner, you understand that there's an informal economy that takes care of about mama beta bata sama fruit nama vegetables. And so what does education do? It is the spear that a young person has in their hand right now to enter into those boardrooms and to change the lives of an ordinary South African who might not have access to doing all of that. And so revolutionary activism is no longer sloganeering. It's no longer just shouting slogans. We no longer need guns in our hands, but the gun that can change the life of an ordinary South African is one that we've identified as the education in this lifetime. And this is why when you look back, we were the same generation that fought for free education in this lifetime, where we sacrificed times that we should have been in class excelling. But we said that this generation will fight so that the coming generations can go into institutions of higher learning. This is why now you have umntana befunda ngesasa grant. Engene ku-institution kuyaziwa vele akanayo imali. They now access this education. And so every generation has a fight and an assignment and a legacy that they need to live forward. And so for our generation, I believe that education is a spear for us to change the material conditions of our societies, not just privilege for us to buy the houses and buy the cars. It's a responsibility that needs to be stewarded with political consciousness and, most importantly, a love for your people.
And then finally, I'm also just curious about, a lot of stories were told today, particularly the Deputy President mentioned some very, very devastating things that women go through, and this happens on a daily basis.
Sure.
So, what role do we need to play collaboratively as a country to sort of combat the scourges that are facing women today?
On the issue of gender-based violence, I think that every speaker was speaking about the power of a collective outcry and a collective fight. What we draw from the generation of 1956 is that they stood together, this making sure that their voices are loud and their impact is heard. We've become a society that is complicit, silent, or just tired. We've normalized that this happens to someone that you know. And so today I think that as we commemorate the fight of the women that have gone before us, we need to strengthen the fight against gender-based violence. And this is also a responsibility and a burden on this generation to not be quiet, to go and support abantu when they are going to court. Don't leave them to go and fight alone. When there's that Makelwane who doesn't have a man protecting her, you as a mama in the community need to rise up. That is the assignment that is before this generation and our mama that have gone before us, to stand together, to fight together, and to not be quiet, even when it's uncomfortable fighting.
I'm most proud of the issue of inclusion, because really there is evidence. It's there in the statistics that were quoted by the minister of how many more women have come into the judiciary. She talked about that there was not a single black judge who was a woman. Today, there are more than 100, according to the figures that she that's just one example. Today, we have Chief Justice of this country, the first woman to be Chief Justice. So those are just one or two examples that I can quote, but I think the speech in whole is illustrating to you the major successes that we have scored.
And then during the speech that you made, you told some very heartbreaking stories and important stories as well, highlighting the need to protect children. And these are something that women and children go through every day.
Yes.
So my question is, from the societal level, never minding government, what is it that we need to do as a society to break the culture that can treat women and children in this way?
That is precisely where I am concerned. Because there's no government that's going to come and supervise a village life. As you go to sleep at night, are you actually a criminal in your home space, where your victims are actually your relatives, your family members, your mother and your child? Because when you sexually molest a child who is your younger brother's child, you are a criminal of insane level, in my view. So I feel that it is more the communities that must come together and talk about how do we protect those children, because in my view, those children living under those circumstances are no different from children who are being bombed by the Israelis in Gaza every day. They are in a war zone when they are supposed to be at home, where they are supposed to be safe, where they are supposed to be experiencing love. So the question I pose to us as South African communities is, what kind of democracy, what kind of safety and security should we even think of being proud of talking about when children experience the kind of things that I was relating and narrating in there? So I think that we should celebrate the success that we've scored. We should be happy, but we should concentrate more on the more vulnerable members of society to measure the quality of what we can truly refer to as a democratic order, whether it is what we fought for, what those women of 1956 marched for. They didn't march for the criminalization of the vulnerable members of our communities and our families.
And then my last question is, what are some of the biggest lessons that you think activists and women of today can learn from those of 1956?
I think the biggest lesson is, in society, we depend on those that have the kind of value system, the values in them, the things that they believe in, which make them feel that they'll never rest until they've ensured that justice is actually scored. And justice will only happen when somebody gets up and says, let us do this. And they move forward and they lead. I remember this young girl, when she was still at FEDSAW, she showed that she is one of those members of society who will truly follow up and follow her heart and follow her values and know the correct thing to do for justice. We need to always be ready to do anything, even if there is a big, strong person like the Boers at the time thought that they were stronger than everybody. They saw us as non-entities, but here we are. We fought for our freedom. The women of 1956 were examples, as we saw in the movie. So I think that the women of today must just know what is their mandate, take the baton and move forward.
From the UN perspective, can you reflect on the theme, empowered women, empowered nations, particularly with the international environment that we find ourselves in today?
If we look at South Africa's role in last year's G20, and particularly in the Women Empowerment Working Group, South Africa really was speaking for the world and building upon the 70 years since the women marched in 1956, but really speaking for the world about the need for us to recommit to women's rights and equality for everybody. We're having a huge tsunami against rights globally, and I think the role of South Africa internationally cannot be understated at this moment. I think South Africa is really well placed with South Africa's history and legacy and everything that the people of South Africa have overcome to move forward together genuinely for equality and to demonstrate to the world how this can be done. I understand from my South Africa brothers and sisters that the women in 1956, they not only marched to the union buildings, but they stood for 30 minutes in silence. That courage, that power, each of us need to take something from that today into the fight that we now have for true equality for everyone.
All right, welcome back to our show. We've just been listening to our female leaders talking about the 70-year commemoration of the 1956 Women's March. And look, we still have a lot of work to do, but we're in the right hands. I think we've got a lot of great activists who are doing some great work, but we have a lot of work to do, and it's important that we get into it. But now I want us to move away to our next topic, and we're going to zoom out a little bit because we're leaving South Africa. I want us to turn our attention to a group of men and women whose work often takes place far from public attention, and whose work takes place in some of the most dangerous and unstable regions. They wear blue helmets, the famous blue helmets, instead of national colors. These famous blue helmets mean that they serve under the flag of the United Nations, and their mission is one of the most difficult. They are assigned with keeping peace where peace has broken down. So, right now, I want to get into thinking a little bit about how South Africa is advancing peace and stability agenda on the African scale on this International Peacekeepers Day. So, Defense Minister Angie Motshekga, we have also gone to the event there. She is joined by members of the South African National Defense Force, military families, veterans, and diplomatic representatives at the South African National Defense Force commemoration of International Day of United Nations Peacekeepers. The ceremony honored South African peacekeepers who have served under the United Nations flag and paid special tribute to those who made the ultimate sacrifice, to those who sadly passed away while deployed in missions across Africa, including the United Nations Stabilization Mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo, known as MONUSCO. The occasion comes at a significant moment where we do have millions of people continue to be affected by conflict on the African continent. From DRC, Sudan, in the Sahel, this fighting remains one of the greatest obstacles to development and democracy and human security. And yet, despite the challenges, thousands of African soldiers continue to place themselves between civilians and violence. So now I want to, think about this a little bit, the importance of these people that maintain the peace. But to understand the significance of this day, to understand the significance of these people, let's go back and think about its origins. The International Day of United Nations Peacekeepers is observed on the 29th of May, and that date commemorates the deployment of the first UN peacekeeping mission in 1948, known as the United Nations Truce Supervision Organization, or UNTSO, UNTSO, UNTSO. And it was established in the Middle East. Since then, more than 1 million military personnel, police officers, and civilians have served in United Nations peacekeeping missions around the world. Today, more than 50,000 peacekeepers continue serving in some of the world's most fragile regions, helping to protect civilians, support political transition, monitor ceasefires, facilitate humanitarian aid, and try to create the conditions for long-term peace. And the theme for this year is investing in peace as we think about the Peacekeepers Day. And it's a theme that recognizes a simple reality. Peace doesn't just happen automatically, right? It requires our work, very, very difficult work. It requires institutions, diplomacy, and resources. And sometimes it requires brave men and women willing to stand between armed groups and vulnerable societies. Here in South Africa, the commemoration took place at the Wall of Remembrance at the SANDF Mobilization Center in De Brugge, just outside Bloemfontein, and the location itself carries profound symbolism. The Wall of Remembrance is a permanent tribute to South African soldiers who have lost their lives in service to the nation and the broader cause of peace and stability. The ceremony included military honors, a wreath-laying service, reflections from military leadership, and the participation of families whose loved one did not return from deployment. Defense Minister Angie Motshekga laid a wreath, while senior military leadership prayed tribute to the fallen. And among one of the most moving aspects of this day was the presence of families. I sent a correspondence down, our senior producer, Mr. Thabo Makwakwa, and I was speaking to him as he came back. And we really got into the idea that, behind every soldier, there's a mom, there's a dad, there's maybe children, there might be a spouse, there might be a community. And when a peacekeeper dies, the sacrifice is carried not only by the individual, but it's a sacrifice by everyone who loved them. One of the stories highlighted during the commemoration, and this is an interview you'll hear with his widow, but they spoke about the commemoration of Bombardier Itumeleng Moreo. And he lost his life while serving in the Democratic Republic of Congo. His widow, Miss Gifilwe Moreo, was among those who participated in the commemoration activities. And the presence of people like her really served as a reminder that peacekeeping is not just an abstract geopolitical exercise. It's deeply, deeply personal. It affects real families, real communities, and real lives. South Africa's contribution to peacekeeping is significant. But that means we are sending young people. I mean, just beyond even just losing their lives, the trauma of going to war. And since we have embraced a foreign policy that is rooted in multilateralism, African solidarity, and conflict resolution, we do have a responsibility to help out as well. But on this Peacekeepers Day, we need to remember that those people they carry a very, very difficult burden. So we remember today our soldiers who have served in numerous peace missions across Africa. We remember their deployments that, have reflected South Africa's belief that African security challenges require collective African solutions, supported by international cooperation. I want a strong UN. I want a strong UN peacekeeping force. And I want a strong South African participation as well, where we can. So right now, I do want to go to another montage. We're going to be listening to some of the soldiers and some of the family members of fallen soldiers, as well as our Minister of Defense. We've got an interview for you. So let's go to another montage from the commemoration event for the International UN Peacekeepers Day that took place just outside Bloemfontein.
Good morning to the viewers. I'm Brigadier General Thabo Masweu. The big Muruti, Fundiso Mkhulu, Muruti Moholo, the Chaplain General is the one responsible for the spiritual well-being of the members of the Department of Defense, the South African National Defense. So we are here this morning to honor the men and women who died in the battles that were in the banner of the United Nations, and also those who fought before in the Central African Republic, and also the Lesotho battles and so on. So today it's a very important day where we invited their families to come and share this special moment with us, where we are saying, even after they've lost their loved ones, they as families remain part of the Defense Force, and we continue to look after them.
Now, Brigadier General, what sort of activities can we expect from today's event?
What we are going to see today happening, we have the Minister of Defense who's going to be laying a wreath on behalf of the department and the President, and we are going to have the Chief of the South African National Defense Force, but today represented by the Chief of Staff, laying a wreath also on behalf of the SNDF, and we are going to see other officials of different departments laying wreaths also to honor the fallen soldiers. And there will be also a representative of the family who's going to lay a wreath on behalf of these families. And all the families after will be given an opportunity to come and lay a wreath and have a moment of silence where they can remember and honor their loved ones.
Of course, for the families who are still at pains at the loss of their family members, what message do you have for them?
Yesterday I had a moment to talk to all of them as they came earlier so that we can make sure that they are comfortable around here. And one of the things that I said to them is they remain part of the defense force. And whatever needs that we are able to provide for, especially those that are aligned with the policies, we will ensure that we do that. Ours as the defense force doesn't end when the member dies. When the member dies, families are able to be taken care of. There is currently what we call the trust fund. The families, they give names of the children. Even if it's from grade R, the child will be funded until they reach tertiary. And after that, then where possible, we assist for them to get jobs, but we leave that responsibility with the families. But more so, any other spiritual need, social need, psychological need, we have chaplains that are there who visit. We have social workers that are there who visit. We have psychologists and so on. So the multi-professional team is designed to make sure that even during this time, they can continue to minister to their families beyond and after the whole situation where members have died. You'd note that it has been announced by the Commander-in-Chief that we are no longer going to be part of the DRC deployments. We are going to focus internally now in trying to deal with our situations. So therefore, there is still an element that is still there, battalion that is still wrapping up. So once they are done, excuse me, because there's equipment and other logistics that needs to be sorted. And upon them finishing, they will come back. We are focusing now on internal deployments. Many of our soldiers now are going to reinforce the borderline protection. And also the announcement also that was made on the OPROSPER, where we are assisting the SAPS with illegal mining and all other crimes that are taking place. So the Defense Force, having been withdrawn from the UN and all the international deployments, they will reinforce these deployments that are needed in the country, especially the borderlands.
Minister, South Africa continues engaging in peacekeeping missions across the continent. What message do you have for at least South Africans and of course the families of the soldiers who are continuing to engage in these missions across the continent?
You know, there's a strange thing that to be able to have peace, you have to fight to keep peace. If you have to protect people, there must be efforts, there must be soldiers, there must be sacrifices. And I think for me today, it's very significant for everybody, especially those who are not soldiers, to reflect and respect and appreciate the life of the soldier. But also to thank their families for the sacrifices and wish them well. And if there is a way of really contributing and supporting, we should. Some of them leave children behind. I know of another one who only saw his child through photos. He never had an opportunity to carry the child. So for me, it's a day to reflect on that and express our gratitude and appreciation to South Africa to say, indeed, there are people who have put their lives not only for us, for the continent, for all of us. And today we reflect and thank them most sincerely and really wish and thank their families and wish their children well.
Any efforts to at least, increase support in terms of, the department in executing their duties, ensuring that the infrastructure and of course the equipment is intact and, they're able to do their work?
No, there is complete commitment. I can really say it. We will be able to announce soon. There's complete commitment from the cabinet, and we're going to take our proposals from cabinet to parliament, because as the defense force, we don't give ourselves money. It's parliament that appropriates money for us. But I can assure you, and can assure even our soldiers, that there is complete commitment to make right some of the challenges that are facing us, which are not only, as I say, only treasury things. It's because of our state of economy, but it impacts very negatively on the work that we're doing. So there is a commitment from government to begin to reprioritize and prioritize defense in a very constrained budget. So there is, and we will be able to announce soon what are the plans and what are the commitments. This is one of the most critical and important days in the life of the Defence Force, because that's when we reflect on the sacrifices that people, especially our soldiers, make, putting their lives in front of other for other people. So it is for me a very solemn day, a very important day, where you can really visually see even the children that are left behind and the families that are left behind and the pain that comes with being a soldier. So it's a very important day. We want prosper. In 2 months' time, we want results. I don't know. It's doing very well. It's only, we went in April and we want results in May. In any work, we have to really understand the space, plan, and execute. So if anything would have happened and then the whole crime would have gone, I would have been very shocked. Then I will know that something is not going right. So I'm very confident with our soldiers, with our defense force, and indeed, what we went there for will succeed, but with time and with proper planning and execution, which is what we are busy with.
Right. Welcome back to our show. We are bringing it to a close now. We have just been listening to what it was like on the ground at South Africa's celebration of the UN Peacekeepers Day. And I guess, we can end on this note, right? End by remembering that no nation can achieve any sort of development, which is what we want here in Africa, right? No nation can achieve this while trapped in cycles of violence. No economy can thrive while insecurity drives away investment. We can't build the healthcare systems and education systems and infrastructure that we want without peace. So peace is not separate from development. Peace is the foundation upon which development becomes possible. And the goal of peace everywhere around the world is what we aim for as we celebrate this UN Peacekeepers Day. Just before this conversation, we were talking about the commemoration event for the 1956 Women's March. And another important lesson there is that the work is not over. We, as the younger generation now, we've still got work to do for women and for men and for South African society. But we need the same gees, we need the same heart, we need the same fire that the women of 1956 had. And we celebrate them this year and every year after that. My name has been Siaga Tladi. This has been our show, and I am out of here.